Hey there, Path Podcast listeners. This is your editor, Alexis Corley. This week we had some difficulties with our microphone, so we had to use our computer mics, which catches a lot of background noises that you usually wouldn't hear. We apologize for this inconvenience, and thank you for still tuning into the Path Podcast episode by episode. We hope that you still enjoy this episode nonetheless, and know that we will be back on the ball with great audio next episode. Thanks again.
Welcome to the Path Podcast, where we will travel the lives of some bold women, from dreams to detours to destiny. She did not choose this path. This path chose her. This is the Path Podcast.
Welcome back, Path listeners, to another Power Pack episode of the Path Podcast with your sister, Arlene, your motivator, your confidence builder, the one who believes that purpose is bigger than the obstacle you're facing today. Bringing you some of the boldest women in the world. She's your mother, your sister, an auntie or a friend who's intentional about healing and being free. And today is no exception. Today, we're talking about a topic that I've read on the CDC where 12% of women ages 15 to 44 years old in the United States, they're dealing with. And the question my guest asked, is it possible to truly love life if you can't be a mother? Yes, today we're talking infertility. And if this is a trigger for some of you out there, I know a lot of my shows can be. I wish that you were still hanging there because this episode will do something different than I've heard with some other episodes or podcasts that are out there. Because when I found this young lady, her episode to me was different. Not that the other episodes are not great on other podcasts out there, let me say. They're not great because they talk about their journey through infertility, but a lot of them seem like a lot of their stories ended with their miracle child. And my guest today has a different outlook on this. My guest today, her name is Lana Manikowski. Let me tell you a little bit about Lana, and then I'll tell you what we will get into in the show. Lana Manikowski, after 7 years of fertility treatments and a lifetime dreaming of motherhood, Lana was presented with the realization that she could not have children. Lana is a certified coach with a specialty in casual coaching, a methodology based on the relationship between one's beliefs, feelings, and actions. Lana helps women rediscover their meaning and build a future they truly love. Now, before I say more about her, because we're going to get into all of that, I'm going to first welcome Lana Manikowski into the show. Welcome, Lana. Thank you for coming to the Path Podcast.
Arlene, I'm so blessed that we found one another, and more especially blessed that you reached out to me and have graciously invited me to be on your podcast to speak about a topic that I think so many people shy away from talking about and maybe feel very alienated and misunderstood. So they keep their story very close to them. And it's just my sincere honor to be able to shed light for others, and especially to your listeners who maybe have been suffering with this in silence.
No, thank you, because when I discovered you and looked at what you were doing and the turn you took with what you had to deal with, I knew it seemed like it's an instant connection I have sometimes with some people. And not only that I can't have it, but others who may not be where you are today, because I always love to say, you know, everyone out there, don't compare our chapter 20 with your chapter 1, but to see the turn you took with it. And like you said, it wasn't easy because it was still a journey, but where you are today and wanting to find that community and build that community for what you needed at that time, I knew I had to have you on the show. So thank you.
Thank you.
And
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you talked a little bit about my journey, you know, in in your intro there, but there's just, I think just so much of a community that's needed, regardless of what you're going through in life. There is an opportunity to connect with others. And when I couldn't find one for myself, after my treatments had ended and I came to the realization that I wasn't going to be a mom and adoption wasn't working, the the route to adoption
Mhm.
wasn't working out in the way that we had hoped it would. And there's always the opportunity to get an egg donor. And we chose that that wasn't the right path for us. And it's just a matter of realizing that if you're not hearing someone tell their story,
Mhm.
you have the ability to be the first one to step forward and tell yours. And I think that was where my big change was, from finding the guts to just tell my story, because I knew that I needed a community. And if I could be the first one to raise my hand, maybe others would join me in finding a way to live differently if you're not going to be able to be a mother.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, as you can see, you know, you have that calming voice, and people who are really passionate about what they're trying, what they're wanting to do today, because it's something you wanted and needed yourself. And everyone, we're going to tell you all that she's doing. And let me first touch on what the show is about. Today, I want to talk about the false belief that you had about yourself and your future. Um, we will also talk about how to believe differently about your life and rewrite your past. The societal mandates pressure women feel to face their face to have children. The underestimated emotional impact of infertility, from the doctors to again the society to even ourselves. And then almost, I got this from your podcast. Now what? We are moving to the now what. So the first question I want to ask Lana. Tell me about the younger Lana, the one who thought she had life all figured out. We always like to start on a path that way. Just what were your hopes and dreams for yourself?
Well, I always loved children,
Mhm.
and I begged my mom at a young age to let me have a babysitting job. And I was the one in the neighborhood that was always booked up on the weekends, because when I'd babysit, I wasn't sitting on the sofa eating food out of the junk food drawer from the people's home. I was, actively doing fun activities with the kids, and I just truly enjoyed that part of my youth. And my mom says she remembers that I would pray every night when I would say my prayers with her, that I would pray for a child. And I was like 7 or 8 years old, and she was like, "Oh Jesus, just please don't let her get one too early."
I know.
So I distinctly remember, like, I just always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to be with children. I actually got my degree in elementary and special education.
Oh, wow.
And the way my career ended up, I didn't actively work in the classroom, but I worked for a nonprofit organization, and I helped to get governmental funds allocated for Head Start programs and for children with disabilities. So I always had this connection to helping,
Yes.
but also something with the enrichment and growing of children, and seeing them flourish in their lives. So that was kind of the younger version of me. And that said, I ended up not finding the love of my life until I was 35.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful I found him, because he has been the rock in my life and in our fertility journey.
Mm.
But I didn't honestly ever think I would have a problem getting pregnant. I heard about egg freezing and, all these things, but I guess when you're going at life, you don't even think that it's going to be an issue. And I was 37 and not yet pregnant after having been married 2 years. And a
Mm.
girlfriend of mine is like, "Have you thought about maybe going and talking to your doctor about it?" And honestly, until then, I was like, "Oh, I guess that might be a good idea." And then that's when we scheduled an appointment with my OBGYN. They
Mhm.
did some workup for me and saw that my levels were a little bit low, which are to be expected at someone who's 37, because our bodies are, necessarily aren't necessarily designed to have as much success with childbirth that late in life. So the from there, that's where my fertility journey began. But up until then, I just frankly never gave it a second thought that I would have any trouble being a mom.
And if we can be honest, we all have, majority of us, unless someone may have been impacted with someone very close to them, in their circle right there, dealing with that. I don't think any one of us thought that, because to be transparent myself, I had a miscarriage before I had my daughter. And when I had it was very early in my pregnancy. But when it happened, it kind of throws you aback, because and at the time I was 29, almost 30. And still, it just, I didn't think about it. And my doctor at the time told me, he said, nothing to be concerned about. If it happens again, then we would take different measures at that time. But it was nothing to that we should be concerned about. But it did spark that, like, okay. So we never think about that. But I wanted to touch back on, I love the fact when you said I hate to go back when you said you would pray for a baby and your mom was like, oh no, not too soon, please. In her mind, that's what a mother would think. And I didn't know your degree was in the degree you had and everything. So your mind has seemed like always been around that aspect of children, little ones. And so it kind of marvels me how where life goes,
Yes.
from our earlier years. But so I read also, let's go to the point when you said that when your friend recommended you go talk to your doctor. I read they said if a couple starts, according to the CDC, they recommend a woman go to their doctor after a year of at least, a year, 6 months or a year of trying.
6 months is commonly the benchmark for trying to conceive. And if you haven't gotten pregnant, that's when they recommend going and seeing your doctor and talking about other options, or maybe doing some workup.
What were then some of the next steps that you all started to take in that journey?
So we started out with a less invasive approach. It's called intrauterine insemination, or IUI is the acronym. So that would be more of a process that there's less drugs and less workup, but there's still some medical intervention, but it's less invasive than going through in vitro fertilization.
Mm-hmm.
So more of the fertilization happens still within you, whereas in IVF or in vitro fertilization, the sperm and the eggs are then put together in a lab and help through the lab process and the medical intervention to create then a healthy embryo. So when we first started out, we did 7 rounds. So that's probably a year's worth, if not more, because you don't necessarily do them back to back, but it was 7 IUIs.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that wasn't successful, we talked about then moving to more of the in vitro fertilization, the IVF stuff, where that was a very committed process where you had multiple medications, injections in the belly, injections in the behind, like taking medications at a certain time. And I would go for monitoring appointments for my hormone levels every other day. You'd go get a blood draw and an ultrasound. So it was a very committed process when you go through IVF. And there's everyone I knew who had gone through IVF had success with
Mm-hmm.
it. I knew that it wouldn't be an easy road, but I never questioned that it wouldn't work for me.
Okay.
I just believed I just going into it thought, yeah, it's going to work. I had no doubt that it was going to work for me. So although the process was not enjoyable or something that I looked forward to, I just kept telling myself, well, this is going to all be worth it.
Of course.
We'll have our child and this is the route we have to take.
Mm-hmm.
But we were willing to try whatever we could to be parents.
Of course. Because the IVF rate, as like you said, especially with it being so much more invasive, the success rate is pretty high in doing IVF?
Well, it depends on your age. So
Okay.
depending on where you are in your age bracket,
Yes. Okay.
the success rates vary. So either way, I was at the higher range when we started IVF.
Mhm.
But even knowing the rates, I didn't let that get into my mind. I just was like, of course this is going to work. But
I agree.
I was meant to be a mom. Of course,
Exactly.
why would I not have, success? So I would say that the IVF stuff we did here, I live in Chicago. So we did our first couple rounds here in Chicago at a well-known institution with, great physicians. And when that didn't work for us, frankly, I took a couple year break
Mhm.
because I didn't know what was my next best decision. I had hope that maybe I would get pregnant naturally because you do
Mhm.
hear those people that, went through all this and then they just end up naturally getting pregnant. And then I had a girlfriend who was going through IVF and she was going out to a clinic in Colorado that is a very well known clinic
Mhm.
across the world people fly into. And I remember exactly where I was sitting. I was in my car
Mhm.
and sitting in front of this furniture shop that I was about to go into. And she was like, I really think you need to give it another try. Come
Mhm.
out. I'm going to this clinic in Colorado. It's different than the one we went to in Chicago.
Mhm.
And I needed that little push from her. And I called and I scheduled my appointment. And then we continued on and tried more rounds at the clinic in Colorado, and I felt very well taken care of. There's no doubt that whether either clinic, I was so well taken care of,
Mhm.
but it was more so when we found out that we couldn't be parents after a couple years of going back and forth to Colorado, there's nothing left and the communication stops. They don't have anything more to offer you,
Mhm.
and so I don't have any negative feelings towards my healthcare providers or the clinics or anything like that. I feel so grateful in knowing that I did the best that I could
Mhm.
and that I got the best care. But it was more so the lack of support once your journey's over, because you're used to going every other day for this. You have a printed schedule of take your medication at 6 a.m. and another one at 3, and nurses calling you. There's just this
Feel like you're in
constant
something
communication.
together with them. It's a connection.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
we're in
And
this
you build
together.
these like strong relationships.
Mhm.
And then when your journey ends and there's nothing there for you and you're just digesting the fact that you're not going to be a mom or not going to be parents, that's where my void came in. And that's where I saw myself really struggling and searching for a community, which there was none that I was able to find. So
And I
that's
want
when
to
I
talk
talk
about.
about my podcast. Like
Mhm.
I couldn't find one. So I decided to create one because I know that if I'm feeling this way, that there's so many other women that just want to know that there's women out there that are feeling the way that they feel, that won't judge them for these thoughts that we have towards, our life and the indecision and the jealousy and the
Mhm.
yearning.
Mhm.
And so I just really felt moved to create a community for women like me who just want to know they're not alone.
Of course. And let me say, I want to go back and then touch on, because that's one of the questions I have, where I heard on one of your podcasts talk about that time once everything came to, I don't want to say an end, but when you stop going. I want to touch that part, is so important. Before I go there, I want to go back where your friend suggest that you go back and you did another round. So it was like, how many times did you go for you tried, I know you said it can consist of like 7 treatments
Mhm.
for the IUI, and I'm sure the IVF is, like you said, the back and forth every other
Yep.
day almost. About how many times in a group, like 2, 3 different times of trying?
So with IVF, I did 4 rounds. So 2 round when you do a round, you basically are trying to hyper stimulate your body to create more eggs
Okay.
so that you can then have a greater success of having something that will fertilize, and then be able to then have an embryo that could create your child.
Mhm.
So basically, you don't just do like 1 week and you're done. Like there's a building up point to then where you have a healthy embryo that they can then implant back into you, and your baby, hopefully grow. So I did 2 full rounds of IVF in my clinic in Chicago, and then another 2 in the clinic in Colorado. We had initially planned for 3 in Colorado, but my success rates were poor. So the doctor, which I'm very grateful for, said my recommendation is just not to continue. I mean, it's also very cost prohibitive. We
Yes.
spent out of pocket probably, I mean, at least over $100,000 of our money, because insurance, unfortunately, my employer at the time had a lifetime max of 10,500 infertility treatments, which doesn't even scratch the surface of medication for 1 week. It's a very costly process. So
That's
I was
important right
grateful.
there, a whole
Yeah.
show. Just the
Yeah.
cost of it and what
The
insurance
cost.
doesn't cover. So I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but
And insurance, depending on where you are, depending on the state you live in, some states will cover 4 rounds of IVF.
yeah,
But unfortunately, my employer at the time is in a state that doesn't give the 4 rounds, and then they did not have it as a benefit, besides the 10,500 lifetime max.
yes.
So it was financially definitely a big investment for us too.
Mhm.
But my point is that my doctor, he he was like, You were signed up to do 3 rounds, and I'll be honest, I just don't think you should." And
Yeah,
that was our last, like, we knew that was our last round, because why would I go through,
of course.
and it was a tough decision, because you
Mhm.
certainly question yourself, well, what if this happens to be my magic round? But I felt like with the science that was presented to me, and I trusted my doctor, and my husband and I were on the same page with things, it was a very brave decision to make, to stop our treatments. And then from that point forward, decide that we were going to live a life without children.
And let me say that is a brave decision to make. And I love what you said. You looked at you listened to your doctor, you trusted your doctor, the science. You and your husband definitely on the same page. And and to come to grips with that, knowing what the two of you wanted, it's a wonderful and a brave decision to do. And we have to, in everything in our lives, at some point have to make those brave decisions, even if it's not turning out the way we wish it would. So the great point. And to go back into the part you said, you had it was a great team of people. You were at one of the best clinics, obviously. Going back to that time let me ask this question first. Did you have a second opinion when you first, I know when you started your first set of IUIs, you said that, of course you still were expecting, everything was going to be okay. You weren't thinking anything that turned the way it turned out. But did you ever think about doing a second opinion at any point?
I did not. I felt like I had great
That's
care. The people I went to had been recommended by others I knew had gone for treatment from my actual providers, and had success, and have children
mhm,
through IVF. So I trusted that I was in the best hands.
wonderful. So let's go back to that time and it was great, but it was heartbreaking. I know when your doctor definitely told you that he wouldn't recommend it based off of everything I'm sure he observed. When he said that, and then you and your husband, like you said, you all made the decision. After that, going back and forth, you said it was hard because then it was just like everything stopped. It was nothing else was offered. It'd be great if it was some programs after that, to talk to women and families, let's say it that way, because there is a husband and a wife normally, a lot of times, not always, but sometimes, most times, and to offer some care. Because in one of your podcasts, I heard you say it's just like I have to find it. it was nothing. You were just left. The call stopped, like you said earlier. And how was that for you, the two of you?
Well, we felt, I would say there was probably definitely confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing the right thing? I would say for me personally, self-judgment. I shouldn't have waited so long to get married.
Mm-hmm.
I should have tried earlier. There was judgment about adoption. I would say that, people mean well when they first thing, it's very common when someone says that they can't have children, people
Mm-hmm.
are like, well, you could always adopt. And
Mm-hmm.
I know it comes from such a beautiful place because people want to give you hope.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've considered that and it's not the right decision for you, you start to judge yourself like, oh, people probably don't think I tried hard enough, or people probably don't think that I wanted to be a mom as bad because there's still these options out there. And not that I'm telling people not to offer their suggestions, they're certainly allowed to do that. But on the other end of things, most of us have thought about that. If you
Exactly.
have met a woman who's gone through fertility treatments or a woman who can't have a child, she's probably looked into options of surrogacy, adoption, egg donor. So there's a level, I guess what I found through coaching, the reason those recommendations or suggestions from people bothered me so much was
Mhm.
because I see now I was having judgment of myself
Yeah.
for not having tried hard enough, or I believed that I didn't necessarily deserve to be sad about it because there was still more that I could do. So through my coaching training and also, being coached personally, I've come to see that I did try what was best for me and was best for us.
Let me ask you this then, because of what you were thinking, because I wanted to move also into what were some of the beliefs you had about yourself and your future. But did you have those? You were already at a okay place before you started going into the coaching where you really got even a better understanding, or coaching kind of just helped truly getting that full understanding? Like, I did.
Until I discovered coaching and worked on reevaluating the beliefs I had about my life
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't a mother,
Mm-hmm.
I would I was very lost. I didn't think that I had an option to think differently about my life
Yeah.
or to dream about my life. And so until I understood through my coaching mentor and then becoming certified when I got certified at the life coach school, I didn't really understand the power we have to create the life that we want.
Mm-hmm.
So up until then, I was still probably three or 4 years just
Mm-hmm.
living in this sense of Groundhog Day, waking up every day and being like, okay, I'm gonna wake up, have my coffee, go to work, come home, eat dinner,
Mm-hmm.
watch some TV, and go back to bed and do it all over again.
Exactly.
Until I discovered that I had an option to do differently and think differently
Mhm.
and believe differently about my life.
Of course. Let me tell you something. I read somewhere else. It said there's the idea that as a woman, we are supposed to have babies and we are supposed to give birth. You're a difficult woman if you're not thinking about kids. Then if there's an issue with it, you're somehow broken. Does that resonate in any way with you? Of course, at the time afterwards, I'll say days and months afterwards, feeling broken, or like you
For
said,
sure. I
yeah,
feel I had a lot of shame
yeah.
that I didn't talk to others that I couldn't have a child because I felt like very much like shameful that my body didn't do what it was supposed to do. I felt like I had taken the opportunity from my husband to be a father. So I felt very broken in the fact that I couldn't continue the legacy of his last name.
Mhm.
And my in-laws, who I love dearly, they didn't have grandchildren, and I felt like I was taking that title away from them, and they were just lovely and caring and just such great parents to my husband and in-laws to me that I just felt like I robbed them of the opportunity to be grandparents.
Of,
So there was so much judgment I had about my story and about my life.
of course. And again, a lot of what you say, it's a lot of what we believe ourselves and not what our families and anyone else is making us feel, even though I'm hearing it talked about more today, but because we didn't hear so much, you don't hear it talked about, we didn't hear it talked about so much, I'll say, past as we have here today, thankfully. And today can be in the year, some year, a number of years, but yeah, it's the beliefs that we tell ourselves, and that's with everything from the divorce or everything people go through. We tell our stories ourselves that, or I won't be happy. I want to ask you because you mentioned your husband. He went through this too. This podcast talks mostly to women, about women. How it's wonderful to hear. It sounds like you were all always on the same page. How did he deal with it himself? Or do you feel like he was always trying to take care of Lana, making sure that you were okay? Do you feel like, as you know, that he was at peace himself, being dad?
I would say that he was such a support for me in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't judge myself over it now, but because I've consciously decided not to, but
Mm-hmm.
I see how I rarely asked, "How are you doing?" Because I felt like it was my body.
Mm-hmm.
It was me getting the injections. It was me going for the blood draws. It was me doing all the physical part of the workup and the process. And I never really stopped to wonder how he was doing. And I'm so grateful to him that he never stopped to tell me that or make me feel bad about it, because
Wonderful.
I know it was hard for him, and he does not talk about it very much. But I know he still wishes he could be a dad.
Of course.
And I feel grateful that I have somebody who was there for me and such a support to me. And in hindsight, I probably would have paid more attention to what he needed emotionally,
Mhm.
but I just was just so focused on my process that I feel like I forgot about him. So it's so important to check in with the partners and see how they're feeling, because just like motherhood's important to me, fatherhood was so important to him. And he comes from a very faithful family, and the nucleus of the family being so important, and just knowing that it stops with us
Mhm.
is a hard thing.
It is. And let me say this, it is a lot for us. Like you said, your body was the one going through a lot of it. It is so the hormones and everything. So I every woman out there who doesn't mean no harm, to our men, I'm sure he understood that. And it takes someone, I think, wonderful also, even though, yes, no matter what he may have dealt with himself or dealing with, it was hard for him, but it's wonderful when somebody can be selfless too, to let it be about you. And because I know another couple who went through some tumultuous times as that, such as this, and still, and that one husband too, who is like they take that back seat, but they're hurting too as well. You wish there were so many more infertility podcasts out there where men can talk, where they can, even though they can learn from you, still you coming from the perspective of a female, but still just to have that male's perspective. And when I'm sure there's some, you just wish it was more. I wish it was more out there
Yeah,
for them.
I agree.
Your husband he might have to come on
Yeah,
there.
we'll get him tuned into that.
And so we'll be listening and we can recommend other people to come and hear both sides as a couple, then as the man, the husband, and yeah, it is a hard thing, but it's wonderful still that he made it. He was selfless enough, I'll still say, to allow you to have that time, because it is a lot that you had to go through yourself. And again, when you went
Absolutely.
back into everything, how was it for you having to be around other friends and family that you're starting to see have children, or were you in
It
a
was a
better place by that time?
It was a very dark place. I judged myself a lot because I had such jealousy
Mhm.
um, for my friends having the experience. It wasn't jealous of them, it was more jealous of the experience. And I remember going through Target and going through passing the maternity section and just dreaming of what I would one day look like when I had a baby, or picking out strollers and car seats and all of the things that go along with preparing for a child on a different level. And I felt very envious of knowing that I never would have that experience of planning a baby shower. And so I would host a lot. I noticed that I did a lot of the hosting, and I
Mhm.
think subconsciously that was my way of showing love to my friends and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you," but also it kept me focused on like preparing for the party and getting the food ready and having the decorations. And so it kept
Mhm.
my mind off of what it was that I was missing in my own life.
Of course.
So I have done a lot of work through coaching on letting go of the self judgment that I had of those jealous feelings for people that were nothing but good to me and there for me and supportive of me. um, I judged myself a lot for feeling envy and jealousy towards their experience of being parents.
And of course, then that's you were pouting one more thing on top of yourself, feeling the jealousy and enviness. But like you said, what I love what you said is you were jealous of the experience. And everyone out there, oh my goodness, I can't imagine that person who you have those close friends and your families and everybody, other people who are having babies and seeing the mother walk um, down the street, you know, 8, 9 months pregnant, and it's this experience that your loved one may be feeling. So give them grace, and just understand. And some of us out there, when you're screaming at those babies, think of your loved one who may have experienced this. We have to show that person, to understand that person. And of course, it's not what's coming from a place of jealousy to the person you love, your friends. It's that experience, and it's understandable. And it's understandable. You said it took some time to heal, and now you're here to offer that to others. So tell me, now what? So now what? You have a podcast, the So Now What podcast. And again, we talked about it, and Stitch Coaching. Tell me which one came first, and let's dive into everyone. We have to go through that. I wanted to go through the stories of what she had to go through, because she's just not just sitting here coaching. She's not just sitting here starting a podcast. It came from pain and the struggle of something she understands very well. So again, tell us about this, the So Now What podcast and Stitch Coaching. What are they, and what are they
Well,
about?
so the So Now What podcast, which I started in September of 2021. So it's what, about 6 months ago.
Yes, I heard you
I
said it was a long time coming.
Yes, it was, because what I realized, so to answer your question first, the podcast came while I was still in my certification for my coaching. So I hadn't launched Stitch Coaching yet until I finished my certification. And that's when I officially launched my coaching business,
Mhm.
or my practice, I should say. But Stitch Coaching, a lot of what I teach my clients is very much mirrored in my podcast or based off the content in my podcast. And so I chose the name, the So Now What podcast, which I'm sure you'll probably link to it in the show notes, but if you look at my logo for the podcast, it has "So Now What" with a question mark encircled,
Mhm.
because I think whether you're going through fertility treatments or whatever you're going through in your life, when you come to this end of something or crossroads in something, or your life brings something to you that you're not expecting, you're kind of asking yourself, so now what? So my goal is to take away the question mark of asking, so now what, and replacing it with a colon, of this laundry list of things that you will do after you've realized that things aren't going in the direction you're going. So the So Now What podcast is really I try to do like a mini lesson that I don't want people to only have the ability to change their lives and impact their lives if they pay for it. I'm very much an advocate of giving information for free. Like my goal is to not become a gazillionaire by being a coach, but to really, my love for others is given through just this information. And certainly, if someone signs up to coach with me one-on-one, we go in a deeper dive. But my goal with the podcast is to just allow someone in 10 or 15 minutes just to learn about a new concept and then institute it in their lives. So the podcast came first. I'm overwhelmed by the response I've gotten. I've had close to 2,500 unique downloads of the podcast since it launched. And I just, I know that those numbers, it might not seem like a lot to some, but to me, I think of 2,500 individuals who have been touched by a message, or maybe have started to seek a future that they're looking to build, but maybe they just didn't know how.
Of course.
So my
And
podcast comes out every Tuesday, and I just try to touch on a little bit of something. And then my social media on Instagram, I try to expound on it a little bit. And then I always offer a free discovery call if people are interested in just maybe working through a concept. And then obviously if someone wanted to do more in-depth work through coaching, that would be another option. But the podcast came first because I think this story of infertility and navigating your life when a roadblock comes in and you just don't know which direction to go. It's, for me, I found so much better to tell through my voice than typing on social media or through pictures. So the podcast, as well, it has been received, for me, it's been such a tool of healing each week, because I don't think we're ever fully healed from whatever trauma we're going through in our life. And the podcast, just every week, I feel like I'm just peeling away another layer that just is not useful to me in my life anymore.
And everyone, let me tell you what I love about her podcast. It can go, like you said, for anything that you're dealing with, excuse me, any end of something. And that's what I love about your podcast, because it could be if you're now transitioning into a life of out of a relationship, or career change, or your career changing. It can be anything. You just have to replace it with what she went through in her journey. Because what I love on each one, and there are many, like you said, sometimes 15, 20 minutes or less. And so far, it could change, who knows? But it's like you are walking everybody through a step at that point, and it's progression. And like you said, peeling away layers. I love your last one. I started listening to it, where you said two things can coexist. You can still, in your journey, feel that loneliness, or wanting to be that, a mother, and still love the life you are living. And those two things can coexist. We grow in every situation we go through. So it's wonderful, the podcast, that I love it myself, that I will be listening all the time. And I see why it's doing well. And like you said, 2,500 is a lot, trust me, starting September, as I look at stats and everything. And like you said, even if not, it's still 2,500 people who has heard something, and I'm sure they're learning and getting it, and they will come back. It's going to grow. I can see it now.
Thank you. Well, you touched on a quick thing I wanted to point out, where I think so many of us, before we move to a point where we're feeling ready to heal,
yes,
we think that we have to get rid of all of the negativity or the sadness or all that before we allow ourselves, like give ourselves permission to move on to our next step. And what I believe and what I teach in my practice is there's always going to be this compartment of sadness for that despair you went through, or that loss you went through, or the divorce, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, that you have to respect that will always be there. And that doesn't mean that you can't continue to grow from that experience.
Mhm.
And a lot of us have judgment when we have those negative feelings come up for us. We're like, oh, I'm never going to get over this, or what's wrong with me, and just notice it and say, thank you. Thank
Exactly.
you for coming up for me. Thank you for showing me where I've been
Mhm.
and giving me the motivation to grow past this. So thank you for bringing that up, because
Mhm.
I think so many of us think that we have to be done and over that chapter and the book closed and buried in the ground before we can start over and start anew. But it's always going to be with us, because if you don't love who you were in your past, whether you're proud of what you've done or others criticized you or judged you for it, you have to respect that woman that you were
Yes.
then, because that brought you to the path that you're on today.
Yes. Oh, I so love that. You are so correct. That's what I'm telling you. I love your podcast. I
Thank
really
you.
do. And to what you just said, it's I work in divorce ministry at my church, and that's what we always also share with everyone on the call. We count everything as a win. If you know, next week if you didn't cry 10 times and you only cried two, it's a wonderful thing. It's that progression, and it's still you're okay. It's just that maybe it lessens every day, but it doesn't mean that you like you have to be, like you said, you don't have to. It's like you have to be done with everything. You can always grow from where you are and still love the life you have, or start to love that life you have, even though you may be letting go of certain things, little by little. So
Yeah.
I love what you just said. But let
Thank
me
you.
use something you said, as long as I believed I could not have abundance, meaning and success and excitement because I didn't have a child, then this feeling would stay with me. I would never grow nor see the great things I was doing today. Tell me about, coming to that realization as well.
Well, I believed for a long time that the act of being a mother and having a child was what would give me my purpose.
Mhm.
And for many women I know, like, that is such a huge, purpose driven job to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, I know so many amazing women that are mothers, and it's not like you become a mom and then you stop achieving in your life. I know so many amazing women who go on to have these careers and, do this and start businesses, entrepreneurs. And I thought to myself, why am I telling myself that if I can't achieve this one goal I had in my life,
Mhm.
that prevents me from seeking more?
Exactly.
Because there's so many women who become moms, and that's just one notch on the belt. They don't just stop there and like, all right, let's go. We're
Exactly.
done.
Exactly.
So I chose to think, why are you ignoring all the other amazing gifts that you have and the amazing relationships you have with people and the impact that you have on others' lives? And, for example, we've had two different groups of people that we know now who have asked my husband and I, as they've been doing like their will and all that, if we would be guardians for their parents, for their children, if anything ever happened to them. And I have taken that as my opportunity to say, you know what, I might not have a child of my own, but these people that I don't even, you know, we've been chosen by them to care for their children if something ever happened. Like, what a gift that is.
That is a gift.
So I really think that I reevaluated the fact that motherhood
Mhm.
isn't the only thing that I need to show myself and to prove to myself that my life is abundant and my life is full. And that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have openly welcomed it. And I'm sure it would be part of my, greater spectrum of great things in my life.
Of
But
course.
so many of us think, if I just get married, if I just
Exactly.
land my dream job, if I just drive this car that I've always wanted, then I'll be able to feel graciousness for my life. And the
Yes.
truth is, you just have to believe who you are and what you are and the greatness that you are. And those things are just, icing on the cake.
Of course it is. And I know it's sake of time because like I said, her podcasts are so great. I can talk to everybody forever, I always say, and I'm trying to get better and reduce mine some, Lana. But another thing I heard you say again in the podcast, and then I want to go into Stitch coaching because I want to ask again how you came up with the name Stitch Coaching. In your last episode, you said something again that was so important, I think, for everyone to hear. You said you are not abandoning the woman that tried so hard to have children, who did everything she could, because you're choosing to love the life you're building and that you can love. I just love that. Both can exist. And I may have said that earlier, but I just love the fact, like you said, I think we touched on it, but you're right. You're not abandoning that person who really did everything she could to do what she can. And everyone needs to have grace for themselves and take that pressure off of themselves. So,
True. You know, I I remember feeling like if I got to a point that I loved my life and I wasn't a mom, that I was somehow disrespecting the years and the effort
mhm,
and the emotion that I put into my desire to be a mom and the path that we took.
mhm,
And I realized that me having those feelings of like disrespect for my past self
mhm,
were preventing me from moving forward, because it was almost like I wasn't honoring who I wanted to be.
yes,
And that's when I really started to realize that I could still have that section of my heart
mhm,
want to be the mom and remember all that I did, but that shouldn't keep me from moving forward. So if someone's going through a divorce, I know you said at your church you minister, if
mhm,
people become at peace with being divorced and being a single woman or a single mom or whatever their path is taken,
mhm,
they don't have to identify as
yes,
that anymore. They could be like, that's just, my past and
that's my
that's who I am. But
mhm,
I'm not going to prevent that from letting me seek my happiness, because they might think that
yes,
they don't deserve it. They may think others judge them if they love their life as a divorced woman, or
exactly,
that they're enjoying their journey in rediscovery of this new life that they've been given.
yes,
So I think it's really important to just be at peace and not disrespect your path, feel that you're disrespecting what you worked so hard for or worked so hard to keep together,
mhm.
and just be able to move forward from that.
I agree because one thing I said in my very first episode, I said, I rediscovered. You always rediscover who you are once you go through anything major that you consider major, and and the way I always say, yeah, I went through a divorce. It doesn't define Arlene. It's something that happened, and I discovered again who I am and what I love doing, and not because it silenced me, he silenced me, or anything. It's just because we go through so much as women. We work, when you're married, and if the ones who having families, it's just sometimes you silence women. We got a tendency to silence ourselves a lot of times because we put so much into everything and everyone else, and we don't take time to really let our gifts and talents flourish, are the things that we love doing. And so, yeah, it doesn't define any of us because of what we've gone through. So tell me about this. Let's move into also, they go hand in hand, I'm sure, but Stitch Coaching. Tell me again how you came up with the name and about the type of coaching you offer.
A
That you
ca-
offer.
causal coaching
Causal.
is, yep.
Causal.
So Stitch Coaching, I came up with the name of the coaching business because my maiden name, my last name I grew up with, is Stitch.
Uh-huh.
And I also had a history in my career of working in surgery. And so there's doing a lot of stitching.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think of we as women, regardless of what path you're on, that you're stitching the pieces of your life together. And that's really moving on to the type of coaching that I'm trained in is causal coaching. So understanding that what you are believing about your circumstance is causing you to feel a certain way.
Yes.
And so the beliefs you have create your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're feeling a certain way, you take certain actions. So I call that a BFA cycle. So a believe, feel, action cycle, because if you're feeling sad or disappointed, you have to go back and ask yourself, what am I thinking or what am I believing about myself or my story that is causing that feeling for me? And so many of us just glaze past that. We just are like, oh, well, of course, anyone would believe that their life is doom and gloom because
Yes.
they're not a mom.
Yes.
And then just deciding, is that true anymore? It might have been true when I was finishing my fertility cycles,
Mm-hmm.
but if I want to feel differently, I need to understand what I'm believing about myself and my story in order to choose a feeling that I want to take action based on. Because if you're feeling disappointed, you're
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to move forward. You're probably not going to seek new opportunities. You're probably not going to try to build a bridge for yourself. But if you're feeling optimistic
Yes.
because you're believing I could find hope. I could find a life that I love. I could move beyond this. You'll probably take actions that are going to propel you closer to the result of living this full life that you want. So, causal coaching is the type of coaching that I'm trained in through the life coach school
Mm-hmm.
that really you can take any topic, any person, any situation. It's not just people that go through infertility that I'm trained to coach.
Mm-hmm.
I just have chosen to, subset my practice on that, but I have the gift of being able to train anyone through the causal coaching,
Mm-hmm.
the methodologies in which we're taught.
Wonderful.
So
So thank
understanding
you.
that your beliefs create your feelings, and from those feelings you have, you're propelled to take action or maybe not take action and just kind of sit back and cruise through things.
Okay. And everyone, again, like you said, she does coaching for anything you feel like you may be dealing with if you need help through it. It's just she started it based off of, that journey of her journey. But this coaching, and if you listen to her podcast, again, you can fit in whatever your thing is into what she's talking about and how she's walking through a lot of these steps through your podcast, those little mini nuggets people will leave and take from her podcast. And of course, reaching out to her for coaching. And again, everything will be in the show notes. Uh, her coach, all of her contact information. So tell me, how can the listeners, I know we've given the name, but I would like for you to just repeat all of that. How can we connect with you on social media? Tell us again about the podcast name and the coaching and what you may be offering today.
Sure. So my podcast, if you are going to search for it, you have to search 5 words, the So Now What podcast. So you have to search all 5 words and you'll see a purple little logo pop up with So Now What circled. So you'll know that's me.
Yes.
Stitch Coaching, I'm on Instagram at Stitch Coaching, STITCH Coaching. I also have a Facebook page, Stitch Coaching Facebook page, where, like I said, every day I try to put just a little bit of nugget on there that you can chew on and figure out how to institute something into your life or implement something into your life. And then I created actually on my website, which is stitchcoaching.com. I created a freebie because, like I said, I'm very much the believer that I love to give information for free because I'm just passionate about women finding their path. So
Yes.
I created it. It's called The Guide to Loving Your Life Again.
Mhm.
And it's free for download. You can go to stitchcoaching.com and download it, or on Instagram. If you look up in my bio, there's a little link, a link tree, and then you can click on that and you'll see the guide to loving your life again. And through that, I offer some journal prompts
Mhm.
to help women kind of get the thoughts out of their mind. Instead of calling it journaling, I call it paper thinking,
Interesting.
because there's so many thoughts that go on in our mind. And when you actually write them down and take them out of your mind, that's really when you start to see what beliefs you're keeping within you, and deciding whether those are the beliefs that you want to move forward with in your life. So there's 7 journal prompts in there. Affirmations are another thing. So I have a whole the freebie, I call it, guide to loving your life again, is really just a nice kind of intro to some things that you can work on at home in your own time.
Mhm.
And then I have a free guide, a video of how to use the guide. So obviously, you can download all that off Instagram. And then I did 1 hour discovery sessions. I'm doing them for free in February for my Loving Your Life Again. But obviously, if any of your listeners want to schedule one, I'd be
Mhm.
happy to do a free discovery call, and just an hour one-on-one. There's no strings attached. Just kind of understand where you are, and if they wanted to work together and do some more in-depth work, we could talk about that. But just providing them an opportunity to see that you have control in creating the life that you want to create. And it's not, loving your life is not reserved for your next door neighbor,
Mhm.
the lady down the street. It's here for you.
Yes.
And we all just have to do some work sometimes and roll up our sleeves, and we might have to find it and create it for ourselves and make it seem like it's a little bit, more labor intensive than the person next door. But that's okay, because this journey is yours, and it's your journey to love if you choose to do so.
Wow. Well said, Lana. That's well said. And that was so sweet and deep that I was going to ask you if you have um, any last thoughts that you would want to share. I mean, what you just said was wonderful, but if there's anything else that maybe a question I didn't ask, or something that's popping in your mind also that you wanted to add, please share if you would, if there is
Well, I
any.
think we covered off on a lot of great info, and I'm sure it comes through how passionate I am about
Yes.
helping women know that they have the control. There's nothing that anyone did to you is going to stop you from moving forward on this journey of life. And it's okay to feel sorry for yourself. Don't judge yourself if
Yes.
you're feeling like it's hard. Like, it's okay, and that is natural, and that is normal. But you'll just decide that maybe every day you're just going to take one baby step. And no one ever said, when they say keep moving forward, never have I heard anyone say how quick
Yeah.
and how far. So just every day, just purposefully pick one little baby thing you want to work on and move forward from there. So I love you for having me on this podcast. And if your listeners are anything like you, I bet they're wonderful people, and they're so blessed to have you, Arlene, as a guide to them. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you, Lana. I tell you, you know what? She's younger than I am, but I tell you, it's just like I can learn so much. I might need to join that one of her coaching classes, because I love what you're doing. I just love how you present it. I love, you can tell a person who's passionate. And I'm not saying I know people well, but I connect well with like-minded people, and it's a connection. And I can tell you, your heart is in the right place. You want to help everyone, and again, everyone out there. It's not just people who have gone through infertility. It's She's going to help you in her coaching practice uh, move through anything that you may be dealing with. consider connecting with her. I will definitely put all of her information in the show notes. But to end the show, I want to thank you first. And thank you again for taking the time to pour into me and the Path listeners and help us to move past, or let us see it's possible to truly love life, even whatever our circumstance or event is in our lives. In your case, even if you can't be a mother. We share our stories, everyone, because this is more than just about me or Lana. I love ending the shows by what the experts said, and this my guests, because this is her journey. And what Lana shared, and I quote, "It is possible to enjoy your life just as much or more than your friends with kids. The hard truth is that it's your thoughts holding you back from having a fulfilled life, not your lack of motherhood." Lana said in one of her podcasts that I'm living my life with my eyes wide open. I'm choosing to live my life deliberately. Consider working with Lana and allow her to help you rediscover your meaning in life and build a future that you truly love, even without children. Thank you, Lana, again. I so appreciate your time.
Thanks, Arlene. I know this isn't going to be our last time together.
It won't be our last time together.
Yes.
Until next time, Path listeners.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other platforms, so you can stay up on our bi-weekly, real conversations with these bold women. You can follow the Path Podcast on Facebook at the Path Podcast and on Instagram and Twitter at the Path_podcast. And if you would like to be a guest on the show or have questions for a future show, you can email us at thepath4ward@gmail.com. That's thepathforward@gmail.com. And if you're looking for a speaker or you're in need of a life coach, please reach out to me. Again, at thepathforward@gmail.com or at ACKORLEH@gmail.com. Thank you. Until next time.